What is up, everybody? It is Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Do note, also a certified empowerment coach and president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. And I'm telling you, it is hot in Toronto. And our new friend is based in Miami. So he has sent some of his, no pun intended, Miami heat up to Toronto. And we're broadcasting live on June 12th. So hope everyone's keeping blessed and highly favored. And a lot of times you see on Twitter, one of the popular hashtags on Monday is Monday Motivation. Well, this is called hashtag Monday Meltdown, the Monday Melt. It's from Miami to Toronto. It's Monday Melt today. Who is our new friend? It is Dr. Marcus Bright. He is a political commentator and executive director of education for A Better America. He previously served as an adjunct professor of public administration and political science at Lynn University, Florida Atlantic University, and Florida International University. He received his bachelor's degree in government and world affairs from the University of Tampa, a master's degree in public administration from Florida International University, and a Ph.D. in public administration from Florida Atlantic University. Man, Dr. Bright, you make me feel like I got to go back to school. Man, that's great. That's good stuff, man. That is great stuff. So let's welcome to our show for the first time, Dr. Marcus Bright. He is going to be sharing about two great articles called Broken Dreams and Financial Illusions, the secret depression of Black men. There's a part 1 and part 2, and we're going to cover both in the next little while. So, Dr. Bright, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, this is going to be another epic one. I'm looking forward to it. And it's interesting, before we went on, I had asked Dr. Bright if he had had a number of media outlets approaching him about this subject, and he didn't list too many. And I was not surprised but disappointed, because this is a very important issue, and not just for Black men, but society in general. And I think mental health is one of the issues over the last 10 years that I've been doing these online epic conversations that has been very, very front and center. So I'm very happy that Dr. Bright is going to spend some time sharing with us in regards to this issue. But before we let anything else come down the line, can you share a little background about yourself, man?
Yeah, I wear a couple of different hats, as you mentioned. Executive director of an organization called Education for a Better America, which is a sister organization to the National Civil Rights Organization, National Action Network. And essentially, we do educational and public policy programming in cities across the country, partnering with a lot of NAN chapters. Additionally, I write for the Huffington Post and diverse issues in higher education on a regular basis.
Okay, let's go a little further back, my friend. What was life growing up? Where did you grow up? Growing up as a young man, how was that?
Yeah, well, I'm originally from a town called Martin, Tennessee, and I would spend my summers in Memphis. So Martin is about 2.5 hours north of Memphis. It's in rural northwest Tennessee. I'm the first generation of my family not to pick cotton. My mom grew up in West Tennessee.
Wow.
Dad grew up in Middle Tennessee. And from Tennessee, came to Florida. I pretty much spent my entire adult life in Florida, first in West Palm Beach, then Tampa, and now Miami.
How is it, or how does it make you feel that you're the first generation in your lineage not to be picking cotton? I've never met anyone like that, so I find that quite fascinating.
Well, it makes me feel appreciative for the opportunities that I have. It really gives me a historical context of where it is that we've come from, of the vehicle that education can play and the role that education can play in terms of creating a better way of life for an entire family. But it also, it really humbles me and centers me, and to know from which I came. And I'm thankful for the sacrifices that my parents made, thankful for the sacrifices that my grandparents made, so that I could have a better way of life. And so really, my life mission is to do all that I can to make their sacrifices pay off and create opportunities for others.
So your family lineage was not education based. Who were the key people that gave you the insight on the value of education?
Well, it really was education based.
Okay.
Uh, you know, they so my you know they were educators, they were teachers, but just in terms of the economic options that they had in that community, and they grew up in the Jim Crow South, rural South, and so in addition to teaching, they also picked cotton. Uh, my grandfather was very industrious, very diligent, as well as my grandmother. He sold insurance. He hauled hands, what they call. They call. And so my parents, they were. My mom and her siblings were hands, and so he would pick them up in the morning and drive them to the cotton fields, and they would pick. It's it's amazing their system of education. Even during the 1960s, the black kids got out of school in September and October to pick cotton. In April and May, they would pick strawberries until noon and then go to school. And so, but they still pressed the value of education. My mom and her siblings ended up all going and getting higher educations. And so it really, it was really pressed forward to me, the value of education and the kind of role that it can play, not only for our family, but for communities.
Were you the first member of your family to achieve as much or as high an educational standard? Because it
Well,
seems
I had
that
a
well, and I compliment you because it's incredible.
well, I had a cousin who got a Ph.D. in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech, and that really inspired me to also want to achieve at that level. So I did have some examples in my family, and again, my parents, they ended up going, even though they came from modest beginnings, they ended up getting college degrees, and so college wasn't even an option for us. I used basketball as my vehicle to pay for my college education, but going to college wasn't a question for our family. That was always, something that we knew that we were going to do.
What did your parents and your grandparents instill and teach you that you carry on until today?
I think humility, hard work, discipline, a work ethic, and then again using your life to create a better way of life for others and making the most out of what you have. And so even in the segregated South, my grandfather was able to save up money, and he bought a plot of land in Alamo, Tennessee. It's called Simmons Circle. And every time it was time for one of his children to go to college, he sold a plot of that land to help pay for college. And so Simmons Circle to me represents a circle of opportunity. And so any kind of institution that I'm involved in, I want it to be a Simmons Circle because that represents the sacrifice and the vision that he had to put his family in a position to create a better way of life. And so I'm thinking about, I think that he was thinking about me as he was driving before the sun came up, picking kids up to go pick cotton in fields. He said, I'm making this sacrifice so that the next generation will be able to have access to opportunities that he didn't have. So I'm grateful for that, and that's why I feel a special obligation to move that ball forward for not only individually for my family, but systemically to try to change policy and to make our system of education, our system of economics more just.
Did you go into education, especially higher education, with that goal in mind?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I really, I wanted to get, and this kind of moves into the article. I wanted to get a PhD because I like the flexibility, the time flexibility that an academic seemed to have, that an academic or a professor had. And so you would hear about the lack of diversity, the lack of black faculties in colleges and universities. And so I was thinking that, hey, let me bust my tail, get through, get a PhD, and the yellow brick road of opportunity will be open to me. That wasn't the case. I was, I applied. If I'm gonna be transparent, I applied to colleges and universities across the country for administrative and faculty positions for over 3 years.
What?
Barely got an interview. Had to take
How
had
to
to take a
repeat?
job.
How long did you apply for?
I got my Ph.D. in 2014. It's been over 3 years. And so this is just an example of, if I'm locked out with the Ph.D.,
Right.
then others who don't have those credentials, who may have made a mistake and have a criminal record, or may just be a victim of the labor market and demand shortages, and and I don't have children, so if you add those additional pressures on, but I've been locked out, and this is just in academia with every qualification. So this is just a snippet, a snapshot into other industries that we are also locked out from, and we're also underrepresented.
We'll get into the article in just a moment, but I wanted to know, where did you get the inspiration to start writing? Because you're putting out some fantastic content. How did that get started?
Well, I've actually been writing, for the Huffington Post since 2012. Really have really picked it up in the last few months. I've published about 30 articles since the beginning of April, and it's just an avenue. I believe in using whatever avenue that you have to make a difference. And so it's like, the NBA Finals is coming on now. If radio and TV are blocked from you, use the avenue that you have.
So that's why you schedule at 7 p.m. Okay, now I get it. That's why. Okay, I figure it out now.
Hey,
that's why I want 7 p.m. Okay.
Use whatever avenue that you have.
Okay.
You have authority at your job. Use it. Use it. So I'm just trying to use whatever avenue and the gift that God has given me to try to make a difference.
Excellent. So let's start getting into the first of the two articles. Why this article? Why at this time?
Well, I felt a need to make the invisible visible, to try to articulate what I felt had been lying beneath the surface as a result of decades of economic marginalization, particularly for Black people overall, but particularly Black men, given the societal expectations that we have. And I really began thinking about it when I saw the movie Fences. And you'll see the picture when the article is actually Denzel Washington's character from Fences. And there's a lot of unarticulated feelings that I thought, in terms of broken dreams, maybe some of his financial illusions. And I think that underneath the alcoholism, underneath the abuse, underneath his frustration with his lack of career movement was a secret depression. And so it was something that I recognized in other Black men even today. And I wanted to try to articulate the different consequences from economic marginalization, and just try to spread it out as broad as I could. I think one line that really stuck out to me from the movie was a couple lines. One was, he said, "I've been standing still for 18 years. I've been standing still for 18 years." And so that spoke to the lack of social mobility that he felt there in 1950s Pittsburgh, when he was locked out economically from a lot of movement. And then his frustration with that. I remember him telling his older son wanted to borrow $10. He said, "If I give you $10, then we're gonna be eating beans for the rest of the week." And it's like I've been there,
Yep.
I've been
It's
there.
real. It's real.
It's like, man, if I do this, I'm gonna be, I'm gonna be eating oatmeal for the rest of the week. And
Right.
so I just kind of wanted to, take a look at the psychological impact and the different ways that it manifests itself. And I know that, I said that maybe it manifests itself in an exaggerated bravado. A lot of times, as in the movie, we drown ourselves in drug or alcohol abuse to try to cover it up. Excessive kind of flogging or financial illusions. I used the Lil Bow Wow challenge example. For those of you who aren't familiar, he posted a random shot of a private jet, acting as if he were getting on a private jet when he was really riding on a coach commercial airliner. But he felt the need to put up a facade, to flog, so to speak, and present the image of a lifestyle that was not really in alignment with his economic situation. And we clowned him. Everybody clowned him on social media, but to a large extent, many of us do that every day on a regular, everyday basis. And so we've been fooled by credit. We've been fooled by celebrities, by putting on, putting on a mask so to speak, on social media of this grand lifestyle that we're living, that according to the numbers is not in alignment with the numbers, the real numbers of our situation. In the article, I pointed out a few numbers. If you look at black women, average black woman, single black woman with a college degree is worth negative $11,000.
Wow.
Average black woman without a college degree is worth zero. And so even those, and so you may think that, hey, they've gotten this degree, they've done, they've gotten these credentials, but it hasn't improved. Sometimes it makes their wealth situation worse, so to speak. If you look at a quote, and I think maybe in the second article, a guy named Antonio Moore, I think his YouTube channel is Tone Talks. He presents a lot of great economic and wealth data, but he brought out the fact that the median black family of 3 is worth $1,700 if you take out the family car and couch. Those are depreciating assets, and so we're really at a struggling wealth situation. There's a difference between wealth and income, and that's masked largely, and that we don't necessarily want to acknowledge, but the numbers say something different. And so we kind of wanted to, move into the consequences of that. And I think that a lot of black men, we beat ourselves up because we can't, we bought into a societal definition that your value is based on your economic situation. And so if you were born with a deck stacked against you from a historical standpoint, in terms of 244 years of slavery, sharecropping, Jim Crow, the Federal Housing Administration policy where you couldn't get access to FHA home loan insurance by virtue of being black. From 1934 to 1968, 98% of those home mortgage insurances went to white folk. So we were redlined. We were boxed out during the greatest wealth appreciation boom in terms of housing, that our nation has seen. FHA subsidized entire subdivisions, entire suburban communities that we didn't have access to. And so that accumulation of wealth assets, if you look at Social Security, unemployment insurance, we read about the New Deal in history with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but the history books don't tell you that most black folk were left out of the New Deal for the first 25 to 30 years. Think about in the South, farm workers and domestics were excluded from those benefits. And so the accumulation of these assets that we were locked out from then put us at a significant wealth disadvantage, where when it comes time for us to go to college, then we have to go into enormous amounts of debt when other communities may not have to. When it's time for now in this age to be passed down in the houses that are in neighborhoods that appreciate, we don't have that. We don't have. We may looking at the numbers. We don't have the money for mommy and daddy to give us a down payment on a house in large part. And so I put in the article that we began a 100-yard dash 50 yards behind. And so we have to acknowledge that and understand, men and women understand, the position that we are from a numbers standpoint, and not beat ourselves up trying to live up to some kind of imaginary standard.
And I appreciate some of the data that you share at the beginning of the first article, and I'm sure there's piles of it more that you could have put in, but obviously due to restriction of length. But when you were doing this research and seeing this data, how did that make you feel emotionally?
Well, it made me feel, it really brought clarity, because I think that sometimes, we can get down on ourselves and we think that it's all an individual failure. If you're trying to measure up, look, if someone has a 50-yard head start, a 100-yard dash, and they say, hey, start the race, and you're running as hard as you can, and you're still a significant distance behind, and you're trying to figure out, why am I so far behind when I did everything that I was supposed to have done? You got to take advantage. You got to look at the built-in disadvantage that you had, and be real with yourself, and not try to keep up with the Joneses, and don't let Don't let the dominant society define who you are as a man. Reverend Sharpton had a great quote I heard him say once. He said that those who define you can confine you. And so a lot of our black men, we give society the power to define us. Therefore, they can confine us. And we end up beating ourselves up and trying to chase illusions and not appreciating what we have, not maximizing that which we have, and then engaging in self-destructive behaviors and feeling that we have to result to, and we've been locked out. Now, I talked about this, I'm lucky to have a job, but, many brothers don't have a job. I looked at in several major cities, especially in the Northeast, look at Philadelphia, Baltimore, Chicago, you're looking at 45% or higher a jobless rate for young black men. Milwaukee at 55%. And so if you're being measured by a materialistic society, your value based on your financial situation, and what does that do to the psyche? We're coming up on Father's Day. What does it do to the psyche of an unemployed black father or unemployed father or underemployed father who can't measure up financially to the Eurocentric expectation of, the man is supposed to be the provider. The man is supposed to, you go out to eat, the man is supposed to cover the entire bill every single time. You may just not have it. And so if the world is beating you up, and then sometimes, your spouse may be beating you up, and then in turn you beat yourself up. And so, and that, that's counterproductive. And so it can have the capacity to crush people's self-esteem if they're not strong enough, if they don't understand the situation, if they don't understand the larger dynamic and the historical dynamic of where we are today. The
number of conversation pieces that you're asking me to share with you about. So, what are some of the unfortunate effects of this situation? Like, if you want, you can get further into the mental effect. You also highlight in the article about relationships between black men and black women. Can you expound on some of those effects that this situation has had on black men?
Yes. So one of the, I'm getting an echo. Okay. Yeah, one of the aspects where I talked about broken dreams is that, so many of our young men, I went to college on a basketball scholarship, so I can't knock athletics. But, so many of our young men view basketball and football or rapping as their only vehicle out early. And so they dream of that. They invest all of their, a great deal of their energy and their youth into chasing that. And many of them don't have a viable plan B. And so what happens when that dream is deferred, when that dream is crashed? You think about the movie Fences, it's illustrated there where he never got over not making it to the major leagues. Many of our brothers never get over not getting a Division I basketball scholarship or making it to the league, and they didn't invest necessarily in their education. And then without even any kind of post-secondary training, they didn't even find themselves even more economically marginalized when it comes to the labor market. And so if you can't get a job, then hey, you're gonna try to eat this, if it's legal or illegal. And so you may make a bad decision and move into the illegal drug trade or some other nefarious activity, become a victim of the mass incarceration system, come out, and then you really can't get a job. And so that's a perpetual cycle that I see many brothers fall into. It's tough to get over. It's tough to address. And so it's something that we really have to address early. We have to really clarify more and early in our schools the different career options and career paths, if that's vocational trade, if that is, if that's filling out the FAFSA, making sure that you get all of the aid and scholarship money that you qualify for. If that's being serious, being more serious about our selection of college majors and what is required and what are going to be the actual job and economic opportunities based on the major that you select. If that's getting more entrepreneurial education. All of these things are part of the solution.
And we'll certainly get to the solutions as we go on in the conversation. I'd like to know, do you feel that African American society has any responsibility for this situation at the present time?
Yes, I think that it's a combination of behavior. There are certainly behavioral and cultural aspects that that we as a community can improve on. But there are, I think even more so systemic and structural barriers that prevent us. That even when you do everything right, you still get locked out because of the concentrated economic disadvantage. But there's absolutely things that our community can do more, can do better. I mean, we can emphasize financial literacy more and earlier. A lot of things I didn't know about stocks, bonds, investing, credit, trying to avoid going into massive college loan debt if I could help it. A lot of these things, that I didn't, I wasn't as well versed as I could have been. It's not necessarily a part of our daily conversations a lot of times because when you don't have money, uh, you're a little bit behind in terms of knowing how to manage it and how to access it and how to deal with in that realm. Obviously, I think that we can have more of a of an emphasis on creating a college going, and I think that we want to, we preach go to college, but we don't necessarily invest in the things, the nuts and bolts of getting kids in through that pipeline. If you look at there's a lot of talk about STEM careers and the opportunities in STEM fields and the lucrative job opportunities that are going to be there. The gatekeeper to a lot of these STEM majors and STEM careers is math. And so a lot of our kids who do make it to college, because they don't have the math competency to be able to get through the gatekeeper courses of like college algebra and calculus, those majors are wiped off the table. So they don't even have the choice of majoring in engineering or physics or some of these more lucrative majors. And so we can, just by changing our priority structure, I understand. Again, I'm good on athletics, but sometimes we need to just look at the athletic model and how we're training up world-class athletes and transfer some of that into our academic endeavors, especially in those critical gatekeeper subjects like math.
Also, too, what effect has the changing economy had on this subject when it comes to black men? Because you mentioned how rural
Yeah.
America is losing all their jobs, and a lot of those jobs in rural America used to be held by black men.
Oh yeah, tremendous, tremendous. If you look at globalization and automation has hit everybody, and I think that when the Rust Belt, when rural America, when they get the flu, we get pneumonia, and so even in those industries of growth. So I think I pointed out in one of the articles where under Barack Obama we had 75 consecutive months of private sector job growth, but we're still doubly unemployed. A lot of it has to do with private sector discrimination, and then at the same time, you have the reduction of the public sector. You see, we're seeing President Trump propose massive cuts to the public sector. We're seeing them try to shift billions of dollars from public schools to privatized charter schools, and then starving out the public institutions that the majority of our kids go to. All of these things make a tremendous difference, and so. Absolutely, the changing dynamics of the labor force, obviously competition from immigrant groups that come in and kind of they in some respects they've taken over some of the jobs that some of the blue collar jobs that used to be occupied by black men, and so we have to really look at retooling ourselves and adjusting to this new dynamic.
Well, let's move into the part two of the article, and let me ask you, I guess, what was the reaction to the first article, and what caused you to write a part two?
Well, the reaction to the first article was really overwhelming. It's been shared over 24,000 times just on Facebook alone. Brothers were inboxing me from all over the world. Just saying how much they identify with it. You know,
What were some of the
it was
things?
one guy.
What were some of the messages they were telling you, black men from around the world? Because it's interesting because I can relate. So I
Yeah,
have a worldwide platform. So one of the things I've experienced is black men around the world have a lot of times the same challenges no matter where they live.
yeah, and I think just just the feelings, just the financial pressure that they feel. And then just not things not living up to. There's the one guy. He was in his 50s, I believe. He had a law degree, and he was, his career was just kind of in neutral, and I guess he wasn't making the money that he wanted to make. But he was kind of being economically locked out and marginalized, and because of that, his whole, because his value, his internal value, his internal self-esteem was really beaten down. Another brother. He said, I've got these credentials, I've done this and this, but I'm making like $45,000, and he didn't feel that he could provide any value to a wife or to a family, just based on his financial situation. So, a lot of those, a lot of those kind of messages, and just the social sanctions, that come along with, with not being where you want to be economically.
And what messages are you getting from? Were you getting from women, or are you still getting from women in regards to the first article?
I think that women are, it provided, it kind of gave them a deeper level of understanding to what brothers go through, and an increased level of empathy for their plight. And I think that they'll be a little bit more understanding of of brothers' circumstances, and really return to that team dynamic. My parents, they really worked as a team. It wasn't, my dad wasn't under incredible pressure. It was like, hey, we're a team, we're gonna figure this out together. We understand that the deck is stacked up against both of us. Let's figure this thing out, and do what we can to raise his family versus beating each other up because they don't have this and this and this. From an economic standpoint.
Right. Okay. Well, part two of the article, you provide some solutions, call to action. So the first one you suggest is encourage flexible credit requirements for home ownership. Can you expound on that for us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, basically, because because we've been boxed out of a lot of home ownership opportunities, and we don't have the wealth built up. A lot of what stops, particularly, millennials from buying homes is credit issues. Because because they've had to go into such large amounts of debt if they went to college, or or just not having any kind of financial reserves. Those kind of. So just when I say flexible credit requirements, taking into account utilities and rent and things of that nature, as also, to garner or to gauge credit worthiness.
Do you
Another.
go ahead? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna move to the jobs and contracts part of it too.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that we were working with Education for a Better America and National Action Network was really trying to look at these issues of economic opportunity, starting with, and I think the lowest hanging fruit is in public sector contracts, public sector workforce participation. In every city in the country, these entities, they spend billions of dollars on public projects. I mean, you name it across the board. If it's development, if it's a school district, if it's whatnot. And for years, we've been only getting very nominal, maybe 1%, 2%, 3% participation or percentage of contracts. And so we really have to hold our elected officials accountable to get the data and to mobilize around that, data. One of the things we had a session out in San Diego, and it came up that only 36 workers out of around 2,100 on city funded work projects were black. And so not only were they not getting contracts, but they weren't even getting jobs from those companies that got contracts. And so that doesn't make sense when when we pay taxes like everyone else, but we're not getting our share of the economic pie. And so I think that these are the kind of issues that we should be mobilizing around. These are the kind of issues that we should hold our public officials accountable for, especially in the era of Donald Trump. And we're not going to get a lot of help from the federal level. So it's imperative that we really mobilize around state and local policy issues, especially those economic issues that are going to bring jobs and bring tangible resources and money in our pockets so that we can provide for our families.
Another area that you highlight in your part 2 is contracts and workforce participation.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was kind of what I was looking at there. And again, for those listening, your county government, your school district, who from the public sector, look at who they're giving contracts to. If your city is, let's say, 30% Black, you should have 30% of the contracts. You should have at least 30% workforce participation. And so a lot of time, we have to hold our politicians accountable. A lot of our communities, hey, we love our congressmen, we love our congresswoman. We know they've been elected. They come to the pancake breakfast. They do all of that, but we have to start demanding that they bring data. Can we see the data on who's getting the contracts? Can we see the data on the workforce participation for Blacks in terms of who's working on those jobs? Can we have some goals for targeted inclusion so that these brothers that are out here unemployed and can't get jobs, so that they can get access to jobs, at least in the public sector? And another thing I looked at, even in the private sector, Dr. King, before he died, he established something called Operation Breadbasket that was based out of Chicago. And they were looking at the large private firms and looking at their percentage of Black workforce, looking at the department stores. How many Black products do you have in there? We have to look at channeling our buying power. And so if they won't hire you, if these corporations aren't hiring you, we need to look at how we spend our money and channel our buying power to force them to create more economic opportunity for us. We have to return to organizing around these economic issues. That we have and that's part of what this, Instagram and Facebook and credit and celebrities have given us the illusion that, hey, we're good economically, we're good financially, when the numbers suggest that we aren't. And so I think that dramatizing the problem, dramatizing the issue is key to organizing around it and demanding our piece of the economic pie so that we can, in fact, get our share of the jobs, get our share of contracts, get our share of operational and business capital, get access to capital so that we can start our own businesses. But all of these things are not going to be given to us. Anything of value is not going to be given. Frederick Douglass said that power concedes nothing without a demand. And so it may involve not being nice. Being nice hasn't got us a whole lot. We want to be nice. We want to be liked. We have to, we're going to have to go ruffle some feathers sometimes. We're going to have to make some demands. We're going to have to demand some targets. We're going to have to demand inclusion. We're going to demand economic justice. I think that's that was what Dr. King was focused on in his last year of life. And I think that we need to really pick up that torch and run with it.
When it comes to economics, it seems that there's something holding back a number of African Americans in making that next step. What do you think are some of the root causes for some or a number of African Americans to make that next step?
Well, I think that I talked about some of the policy issues, I'll add to. I think that we need to have immediate record expungement, at least for nonviolent drug offenses, so that when folks have already paid their debt to society, I think that those records should be immediately expunged so that they could then at least be in the pool to be viable economic citizens. So I think that we need to continue to push for ban the box initiatives like Austin, Texas did, where you don't have to disclose, at least in the initial part, your past criminal history. So I think some of these systemic and policy barriers we really have to concentrate and address those. I think that would go a long way from a personal and from a behavioral standpoint. I think that we have to elevate the trades again. Elevate. There's dignity in being a plumber, being a carpenter, just getting a skill set that's going to be able to provide you a living. Obviously, increasing our financial literacy, that can always help. It's not a solution in itself, but it can certainly help. Channeling, working together to create partnerships and co-ops and joint ventures, and trying to pool the money and resources that we do have to try to create our own economic base. These are some things that we can be doing in the meantime, but they have to be complemented, I think, by large-scale policy initiatives and legislations and agreements with companies and agreements with cities and contracts and jobs and those kind of things as well. So I think that a mix of the structural and the individual is what's needed.
Another point that you focus on buying power and partner on entrepreneurial ventures.
Right. So again, I think that a lot of because we may not necessarily have the initial capital built up to be able to start a business. We may have to pool our resources and do joint ventures in order to try to create an economic base and really maximize these entrepreneurial opportunities. A lot of legally, find legal means to get this kind of capital to maximize entrepreneurial opportunities. So I think that looking at if that's small business incubators, if that's co-ops, if that's, hey, me and Dr. Vi, how much money do you have to put on this idea? Let's start a business. Let's try to get some side hustles. Whatever we can do, because we know that we're gonna have to go 3 to 4 to 5 times harder because the deck is stacked against us, because we're already at a disadvantage, and we have to let's acknowledge that, but we can't use that as a crutch to not go as hard as we can.
Your next point is increasing financial literacy. I know you've sort of high levels talked about the importance of this, but is there any areas of in regards to financial literacy you'd like to expound upon any more than you already have?
Well, I think that we should institutionalize it in our schools. Institutionalize just the basics of credit and how to manage a checking account, savings account, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, the basics of starting a business. I think these should be core. It should be part of the core curriculum that every student learns. I graduated college and didn't know what a mutual fund was. And so, that it just doesn't make sense. And so I think that these can be systemic things that we can push forward at our local school boards, at our state boards of education. Push for these things to be institutionalized in our school system so that our children would be more equipped. Also, again, be more cognizant of the college majors that we're selecting, because right now we're kind of misguided. I'm all about following your passion and all of this, but some of what's happening right now is that our kids are going into enormous amounts of debt, majoring in subjects where there's really no labor market demand. And so they graduate in enormous amounts of debt, can't get a job in their field. They end up getting a job in some other field, and a lot of times they may be underemployed. And then we have that pile of student debt that just keeps piling on, and we're unable to pay for it. That's why you see the student loan default rates as high as they are, because people are just barely scraping to get by and pay basic bills, be able to go out and have a meal every once in a while, much less pay student loans. So we just have to be realistic and more strategic, even as we pursue higher education. We just have to be more strategic in looking at the cost of what we're getting ourselves into, and realistically, what are we going to do with this major that we majored in?
It's interesting. One of the paragraphs from part two, you quote, it must be emphasized, however, that financial literacy alone is not an adequate solution to economic marginalization. It is one piece of a much larger set of policies and practices that should be revamped. Contrary to popular belief, studies show that blacks actually save at a higher rate than
Right.
white counterparts. It's other factors like inheritance, money transfers, and other unearned benefits that make the bulk of the difference. Economists have estimated that up to 80% of the wealth that is accumulated during a lifetime can be directly attributed to past generations. And it's so
Right.
interesting because one of the regulars on the Dr. Vibe show, Epic Conversation, said a while back that too many people, especially black men, are dying with a bill, not a will.
Yeah. 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 And it's easy for that to happen. Like you say, if they're saying, so the narrative that we're pushing is you have to go to college to get a job. And so we're going to college. We don't have a college fund. We don't have a college savings fund. If you get additional degrees, add that even more. And so you're beginning life significantly in the hole already. So you don't have any wealth, and then you're going deeper into the hole, and then the cost of living and those core expenditures in terms of housing, transportation, food, they just keep coming. They keep going up. Wages aren't going up. So at what point do we unless you hit the athletic lottery or the rap lottery or the media lottery, the entertainment lottery, which is what many of us are banking on, then I mean, it's hard. It's going to be hard to make up that difference. Just being hey, just save your money. It's hard when you don't have money to save.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, people like to say, hey, don't go buy Jordans. Don't don't go get a new weave. Or okay, if I don't buy Jordans, then what? I'll be able to pay. I'll be able to pay a light bill. I can pay my light bill on time. I didn't get the Jordans. You know what I'm saying? That's not real money. That's not real wealth. And so, we really have to have and some of the policy solutions that I talked about just with contracts, those are minor. I try to look at the low hanging fruit, the things that are really achievable, because, reparations is not politically, it's not going to get passed politically anytime soon. I think Sandy Darity, economist out of Duke, had a good idea with baby bonds in terms of putting like $50,000, and I don't know the specific details of his proposal, but it's something like put $50,000 for low-income babies in a trust fund at their birth. Let that money accrue, and then when they turn 18, they can use that money for college or certain other expenditures. And so this, things like that are going to create a massive economic shift is really what we need. But in the meantime, hey, enjoy life. Go to the park, go to the beach. Enjoy your family. Don't beat yourself up. Do the best that you can. But don't forget. Don't let this. Don't let this financial trap of trying to keep up with the Joneses crush your spirits or crush your self-esteem. Be sure to enjoy life, enjoy your family. Regardless of what your situation is, because if you have health, if you're breathing, you have a chance.
As long as you're above ground, right?
Right, you have a chance. Right.
There you go. Another point, and you had mentioned a little bit before about avoiding college debt, but I have a conversation piece here. If education is still important, and the cost of education is never going down,
right?
How do you avoid that trap? Because it's an interesting sidelight, because I always like when I share with people who are in college or university, especially when they're taking business, I say, why are you taking business? You're part of a business.
Right. Hey, that's why I said avoid college debt. Get this. If you can. A lot of times it's unavoidable. I went to school, I'm deep, I'm gonna be transparent, I'm deep in debt, in college debt. And I went to my undergrad, I had a full basketball scholarship. So I pretty much didn't have debt then. But my master's degree was all loans. It was all loans. And then even my PhD, even with a stipend, or an assistantship that even provided a stipend of $18,000. But I mean, can you live in Miami with $18,000 a year? So you got to take out loans to live,
Wow.
and just so I'm staying in school until I'm 30. The hardest part of getting a PhD, really, Dr. Vibe, it wasn't even. I mean, the coursework was challenging, dissertation, all of it challenging, but just staying alive, in your upper 20s, staying in school until you're 30, trying to stay alive as a full-time student in a very expensive city. And so, and it causes you to, to go to a lot of different straits just to survive, So that's, sometimes it's unavoidable depending on if you want to do the advanced degrees and whatnot. But there are things that, you don't, especially for an undergraduate degree, the community college option, some of these free college options that are coming up. We should take a look at them and not assume that, hey, I'm gonna get this great job or this great economic opportunity that's just gonna wipe out my debt just because I went to some big name school. Because we have kids that are going 100 grand in debt or more for an undergraduate degree in sociology and women's studies, and no disrespect to those majors, but it can be difficult to get a lucrative job with that. And you sitting with 125 grand, you sitting with a house in debt. And so we just have to take these things, we have to take costs into account, and our school systems have to do a better job of having students fill out scholarship applications, fill out the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA application. These are things that a lot of high schools don't emphasize. A lot of schools don't emphasize that. And so many of our students who would qualify for a lot of financial aid end up not getting it because they either didn't fill out the application or they didn't fill it out in time. And so they miss out on a lot of aid that they could have. And these are the kids that need it the most. And so essentially, the fault is on, the fault ultimately goes on the kid, I guess, for not filling it out. But our schools and our communities have to do a better job of letting students know that it even exists. A lot of our students are missing out on opportunities that they don't know exist. And so we have to do a better job as a community of just giving our students that critical information and making sure that they follow up on these opportunities, while they're young, while they have, before they've before they've gone into an enormous hole that they may not necessarily have to go into.
Better equipping them, correct?
Right.
Great. The final point that and appreciate your transparency. It's appreciated and not taken for granted. Final point you make is the push for immediate record expungement.
Right. Yeah. So we have a mass incarceration crisis among Black men. We're being locked up at record rates. Record rates for the history of the world, type rates. And when they get out, they're almost automatic there because they have to check that box that they've been they have a past criminal history. Many of them on ticky-tack drug charges. They then can't get work. You can't get legitimate work at most, probably most, or a lot of companies, or a lot of employers. They can't get employment. And so if they can at least expunge the records, at least for the nonviolent offenses beginning, you can't even vote. You have a felony in Florida, you can't even vote. So we still have felon disenfranchisement here in Florida. Over 1.6 million people can't vote because they have a felony conviction, so they can't vote, and a lot of them can't get jobs. And so how can you be economically viable when you have that scarlet letter hanging over your head for life? They've already paid their debt to society. Don't punish them for life. And it even puts you at an economic disadvantage. And I'm don't get me wrong, I'm pro immigration reform. We went out there and marched for unaccompanied minors and undocumented students in Hempstead, New York. But our indigenous population, especially Black males, they can't get a lot of construction jobs because of a past criminal record. But someone who's come in from another country, they've been here a week and they're on the job making good money. So that's You know, that's just not fair. You know, you don't know what they've done in that other country. But I've been here my whole life. I have a, you know, if I have a criminal record, I have to drive by you working, you working, you have a job working good in my community, and I can't get it because of a pass, because because somebody smoked some weed or something 10 years ago. So, you know, I'm just bringing fairness to the system, Dr.
Right. Understood. After you wrote the second article, what has been the response on the second article?
This is the funny thing. The first article shared 24,000 times on Facebook. The second article about solutions was shared 8 times.
What?
8 times, yeah. So it didn't get
so
near the traction.
What does that tell you initially?
Well, maybe maybe it just didn't get through the right distribution channels, I'm guessing.
Okay.
You know, maybe because the first article it was tweeted out by Charlemagne the God and Roland Martin and some other and D.L. Hughley put it out. From, I don't know how they got it, but they got it. So these individuals who have high numbers of people that follow them, that may have made a difference. But I don't know. I think maybe people just identify more with with the dissection maybe of the problem than looking at some potential solutions. So
I hope not. I
hope not too. But I do acknowledge that these solutions, they're not all encompassing solutions. So because the solutions are going to be, they involve a lot of times a protracted struggle. They involve the hard work of organizing, person to person organizing, and looking and trying to get data and looking at legislation and making there's not a get rich quick scheme. There's not there's not Oprah, you get a car, you get this. You don't have this. So I'm sorry, my phone is about to die here.
Oh no.
I'm just gonna shift to let me see if I can shift. I'm sorry for not having more of a charge.
No problem.
But if I go out, just know it's my phone and not me.
Okay, well, we'll end up really quick here because your phone's dying. Any last messages you'd like to share with our audience?
I'll just say, stay encouraged. Enjoy your life. Identify 2 or 3 issues, especially around economics, that you could mobilize around in your local area. So, again, I talked about jobs and contracts. That's a good place to start. So let me give everybody an assignment. If you're listening, find out or connect with a civil rights organization like National Action Network, NAACP, that look at these issues. But find out what percentage of blacks are getting public contracts in your area, and what percentage of those individuals who get contracts actually hire black folk. That's one tangible place to start in terms of creating a better economic situation for the broader community. But as far as individually, you define yourself as a man. Don't let society or let anyone else define you. You define yourself, because as Rev said, those who define you can confine you. So don't give anybody that power. You define yourself, stay encouraged, and do the best you can.
If people want to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Hey, you can hit me on Twitter at Marcus A. Bright. I'll even give you my email, marcusabright@gmail.com. Those are probably the 2 best ways to hit me. Marcus A. Bright on Twitter, marcusabright@gmail.com if you want to email me.
Excellent, Marcus. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. I hope you enjoyed another an epic conversation on the Dr. Vibe Show. I just want to add for a message for black men. Either you're going to be at the table or you're going to be on the table.
Yep.
Make a choice. So it's the Dr. Vibe Show here, home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations. One thing I want to get in is also too is the views and opinions expressed on the Dr. Vibe Show are those of the guests and do not necessarily affect the official policy or position of the Dr. Vibe Show. Any content provided by our guests are of their own opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything. If you want to touch base with me, 3 best ways. Twitter at drvibeshow.com, email dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com, and finally, you can contact me via the website at www.drvibeshow.com. I'm going fast because Dr. Bright's battery will go any second, so I'm getting done. I'm shortening up what I usually share. So if you want to catch any replays of the video conversation, just go to the YouTube channel. Thanks for everyone who's subscribing. We're getting close to 200. And audio wise, I'll make it short. Just go to the website. It gives all the places that you can listen to epic audio conversations. Remember, you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. And remember, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Thanks very much for spending some of your time on the Dr. Vibe Show, the home of epic conversations. Bye-bye.